Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Health Reversion. Today, it's all about vitamin B12, so let's get straight into it. Vitamin B12, or Cobalamin, is a member of the B group vitamins that has the most complexity because it is actually a soil-based microorganism. The nutrient contains a metal ion called cobalt. And as you may already know, this is in high demand across the world for use in batteries and particularly the electric car movement, which is taking hold on this planet. B12 plays a key role in helping you to maintain a healthy nervous system and is required to make red blood cells and DNA. Like the other B vitamins, it helps you to extract the energy from all of the macronutrients that you eat. So your carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. In relation to the recommended daily intake, recommended daily value, recommended daily allowance, you're looking at 2.4 micrograms for a stress-free garden variety person. However, a person with additional stress, such as physical or emotional stress, or a breastfeeding woman, the intake rises up to 2.8 micrograms per day. We're going to now discuss the highest B12 content in a range of whole foods. Now, I'm going to initially discuss the seafood side of things because some of the seafoods contain astronomical amounts of B12, many thousands of percent of the recommended daily intake in just a small 100 gram serving. So I'm going to go through a list of some of the seafood that, based on a 100 gram serving, will get you many thousands of percent of your daily intake. These are clams, tuna, oysters, mussels, sardines, snapper, and trout. Just a 100 gram serving of these, you're looking at multiple thousands of percent of the daily value. Now, I do know that seafood is not everybody's preferred option, and depending on where you are in the world, some people just don't have access to fresh seafood or good quality seafood. So now I'm going to go through the other whole food sources which might be a bit more readily available depending on where you are on the planet. Out of the organ meats of lamb, beef, or veal, these are all good sources, but lamb takes the cake as the highest, and a 3-ounce serving contains around about 80 micrograms, which is well over 3,000% of the recommended daily intake. Next up is beef steak, so cooked 6-ounce or 170 grams, contains 12.8 micrograms or 533% of your daily intake. Milk, so low fat, 16-ounce or 473 milliliters, contains 2.6 micrograms or 108%. Swiss cheese is another option, 1 ounce or 28 grams, contains 0.9 micrograms, which is 36%. And finally, we've got a range of eggs here. So if you do have access to eggs, or you have chickens or ducks, 1 goose egg contains 7.3 micrograms, which is 300% of your daily intake. A duck egg follows closely here at 3.7 micrograms or 158% of the daily value. And the humble chicken egg will yield you 0.6 micrograms or 23%. In relation to toxicity, I need to explain to you what happens to B12 once it enters your system. First of all, vitamin B12 binds to the proteins that we consume. In the stomach, hydrochloric acid and enzymes unbind the B12 to allow it to become in its free form. From there, vitamin B12 combines with something that your stomach makes, which is called intrinsic factor. This intrinsic factor binds with the B12 and helps it to be absorbed further down in the small intestine or intestine. Therefore, given that B12 requires this intrinsic factor in order to be assimilated by the body. If you decide, or if anybody's having really high amounts of B12, thinking that the body's going to assimilate and store all of that, because it does actually store vitamin B12 in the liver, then it's probably not going to be of great advantage to the person, because they can only produce so much intrinsic factor. So if there's all this vitamin B12, a lot of it isn't going to be assimilated and used. In my research, I came across several articles and research papers that suggested that B12 can actually be stored in the liver for periods of 12, even up to 24 months. So if you're having B12 on a regular basis through the organ meats that we discussed earlier, through the seafood, etc., then a deficiency is unlikely. As mentioned in the vitamin B9 episode, if an individual is deficient in B12, they have a legitimate deficiency in B12, remember that B9 will often step up and take up the slack in relation to red blood cell production. But over the long term, if an individual does stay deficient in B12 and the other B vitamins are having to do extra work, as mentioned, it can result in damage to the brain and the nervous system. Some potential signs of a B12 deficiency include anemia, seizures, fatigue, and a range of mental health issues, including depression, mania, and over the long term, potentially dementia. And finally, in relation to cooking, just remembering that B12, it's a very tiny soil-based microorganism. So we don't want to apply huge amounts of heat for prolonged periods. A little bit of cooking is okay. And a friendly reminder that B12 is water soluble. So for example, if you are using the red meat, so the steak, to get your B12, just ensuring that you capture those juices somehow. Pour them on your veggies, pour them on the mashed potato, drink it if you will, because the B12 will leak out into those juices and you'll be getting less than you bargained for. That's it for today. If you've got anything you can contribute in a positive manner to this video, if you've got B12 supplements that you take, if you've had experience with other B vitamins, please leave your comments down below. I'd love to read them and hear about your story. In the meantime, I ask that you keep well, and we're going to be looking at the fat-soluble vitamins from now on. See you in the next episode.